The prison yard went silent in an instant. Phones hovered mid-air, cameras aimed at a quiet corner where Hiro stood tall but still, seemingly unaware of the chaos around him. A few seconds earlier, Bully, the notorious yard troublemaker, had been laughing, shoving others, asserting dominance as usual. But then he spotted Hiro. At first he smirked, confident. "Who does he think he is?" the bully muttered under his breath, pacing slowly closer. Every step echoed across the stone yard. Sunlight glinted off the metal fences, casting shadows that danced over the tense scene. Guards glanced up from their posts, wary. Some leaned slightly forward, sensing a confrontation brewing, while others casually kept watch, thinking it would fizzle out, like most yard spats did. The bully got right in Hiro's face now, inches apart. "Oi, you think standing there makes you important?" he sneered, letting his voice carry over the yard. A few inmates chuckled, anticipating the reaction. But Hiro didn't move, didn't flinch. Not a twitch. Not a word. His calmness felt almost unnatural in this place, where every slight could turn into chaos. Whispers spread. Phones raised higher. "He's not reacting. Is he scared?" someone asked. Another replied, "Nah, he's something else, I reckon." The contrast between Bully's aggression and Hiro's stillness made the air heavy, thick with tension. The yard seemed to hold its breath, every eye following the scene. Even the guards shifted subtly. The tension wasn't loud, but it was palpable, like the moment before a storm breaks. A pigeon fluttered overhead, drawing a few glances. A piece of paper tumbled across the yard. Everything tiny felt magnified, every subtle movement telling a story. The bully's confidence wavered for a fraction of a second as he realized this wasn't going to be an ordinary encounter. "Wait till you see what happens at the end," the whisper ran through the crowd. Phones caught the glances, the slight tightening of a fist, the calm, unwavering gaze of Hiro. In this quiet, ordinary prison yard, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Everyone knowingly or unknowingly leaned in. Some braced themselves, others smirked, but every single person was hooked, watching, waiting. The tension stretched. Seconds felt like minutes. And in those frozen moments, the first question flickered through everyone's mind. Who really holds the power here? And more importantly, what will happen next? It was a typical late morning in the prison yard, but for the small crowd gathering near the fences, it felt anything but ordinary. The sun was high, bright enough to cast long shadows from the fences and the worn concrete paths, highlighting the small imperfections on the walls, the peeling paint on the doors, and the scattered leaves that clung stubbornly to the corners. The air was cool with a hint of dampness from the recent rain, and faint echoes bounced off the stone walls, carrying every footstep, every shuffle, every cough. Hiro stood near a cluster of benches, his posture relaxed but alert, hands loosely at his sides. His eyes scanned the yard, calm and unhurried, observing without judgment. Around him, life carried on, the clang of metal doors opening and closing, the distant murmur of other inmates, the occasional barked order from a guard. Yet in this corner of the yard, time seemed to slow. Every movement felt magnified, every glance weighted with meaning. The bully paced nearby, deliberately loud, kicking at small stones on the ground, letting his presence be known. He thrived on attention and intimidation, and today he had chosen Hiro as his target. His eyes narrowed as he watched, calculating, his lips curling into a smirk that suggested both amusement and a challenge. Behind him, a few loyal friends lingered, hovering at just the right distance to be threatening without drawing the guards' immediate attention. The guards themselves were aware something unusual was about to unfold. One shifted his stance, hands resting lightly on the baton at his belt, eyes flicking between the bully and Hiro. Another leaned casually against the wall, pretending to scroll through paperwork, but his ears were tuned to the tension vibrating through the yard. Even small movements, the flutter of a sleeve, the shuffle of feet, the rustle of paper, seemed to echo louder than usual. A group of inmates gathered, sensing a potential confrontation. Phones emerged slowly from pockets, cameras angled carefully. Some whispered, leaning toward each other, speculating quietly, "He's not even reacting, what's he thinking?" Others stayed silent, arms crossed, watching the energy between the two men like spectators waiting for the opening act of a show. The yard, usually noisy with casual chatter, was now filled with an expectant hush. The light shifted subtly as clouds passed overhead, casting alternating patches of sun and shade across the scene. Hiro didn't move, didn't speak, his calm presence creating a quiet force that drew attention. His eyes briefly met the bully's, steady, unshaken, neither challenging nor dismissive, simply observing. That gaze alone seemed to unsettle the aggressor just enough to make him pause mid-step. Every small detail became amplified, the slight tightening of a fist, a nervous glance sideways, the small nod of a guard acknowledging the unusual tension, the subtle whisper of someone shifting their weight. Even the distant sounds of other inmates and guards seemed muted, replaced by the collective focus of everyone watching this silent standoff. In this yard, where power was usually loud and obvious, something different was happening. Calm, measured presence was quietly asserting itself against aggression. And while nothing had happened yet, everyone watching sensed that this ordinary corner of the prison, on an ordinary day, was about to hold something extraordinary. The atmosphere, charged but controlled, drew viewers in, every footstep, glance, and gesture contributing to a slow, deliberate suspense that made the next move feel inevitable, yet unpredictable. The subtle tension, the quiet observation, the shifting glances, and the magnified small movements, all combined to make this moment cinematic, almost tangible. Each onlooker, each guard, each inmate knew they were witnessing something unusual. And just beneath the calm surface, the story of power, patience, and quiet authority was quietly beginning to unfold. The tension in the prison yard stretched like a taut wire, quivering silently as every eye remained fixed on the two men. Hero still stood motionless, his calm presence almost surreal against the nervous energy rippling from Bully. The yard, normally loud with chatter and footsteps, seemed to have contracted around them, a bubble of anticipation that amplified every tiny movement. The Bully shifted from foot to foot, a subtle heel tap on the concrete betraying his impatience. His hands twitched slightly, once brushing against the pocket of his jacket, once clenching unconsciously at his side. He tried to break the stillness with bravado, raising his voice just a fraction, sneering, "You think you're better than us, do ya?" The words carried, but Hero didn't respond. He didn't flinch. Not a twitch. Not a blink. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Phones hovered in midair, screens recording silently, reflecting the sun in quick glints. "He's not even moving, is he scared?" someone murmured. Another voice countered softly, "Nah, he's calm. Too calm. Feels like he's waiting for something." The contradiction of silence and perceived threat made the tension almost unbearable. Every whisper carried weight, every speculation magnified the suspense. Small gestures became monumental. A guard shifted a baton from one hand to another. A pigeon flapped nervously above the fence. One of the bully's friends stepped closer, then paused, reconsidering. The bully, sensing the unspoken observation of everyone in the yard, clenched his jaw and let his gaze sweep over the crowd, trying to reclaim control of the narrative. But Hero's stillness held firm, like a rock in a storm. The light in the yard shifted subtly, clouds moving to cast patches of shadow across the concrete. Each shift revealed new micro-expressions, a twitch of the bully's lips, a narrowing of the eyes, a slight tightening of a fist. The subtlety made the moment feel cinematic, almost suspended in time. Observers leaned in, squinting, trying to anticipate the first real movement, the first reaction that might break the fragile equilibrium. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The rustle of a paper bag in the corner sounded louder than usual. The shuffle of boots on concrete echoed faintly, each step weighed with significance. Inmates murmured quietly among themselves, some leaning closer to see, some keeping silent, arms crossed, absorbing every detail. Guards remained vigilant but restrained, aware that the atmosphere alone was now the most powerful force in the yard. Hero's gaze met the bully's again, unflinching, composed, and unyielding. That calmness, in stark contrast to the bully's growing agitation, created a strange imbalance. The aggressor's smirk flickered into uncertainty, his confidence eroding by mere observation. He tried again, subtly raising his voice, moving slightly closer, but the quiet authority emanating from Hero was unshakable. Seconds felt like minutes. Phones recorded, eyes recorded, whispers circulated, but no one moved. It was as if the yard itself was holding its breath, waiting for the first sign, the first crack, the first motion that would tip the scales. And in that stretched moment, everyone began to sense something remarkable was unfolding. Not through violence, not through shouting, but through calm, measured presence. Nobody expected what happened next. The subtle pattern of tension, patience, and observation had reached its peak. The bully's bravado, once solid, now teetered on uncertainty, while Hero remained an unshakable focal point of composed authority. Every witness felt it, the anticipation, the suspense, the quiet electricity of a standoff that was about to pivot, but in a way no one could have predicted. Phones hovered mid-air, cameras capturing every detail, every micro-expression. The crowd of inmates, usually scattered across the yard, had slowly drawn closer, their attention magnetized by the quiet standoff unfolding before them. Even the guards, who were trained to observe and intervene, paused, subtly leaning forward to catch what was happening without crossing the boundary of authority. The energy was different now. It wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic, it was a focused, almost tangible anticipation that pressed against the walls, the fences, and even the small patches of sun-dappled concrete underfoot. Hero remained calm, his posture relaxed yet commanding. Every subtle movement was deliberate. A shift of weight, a blink, a slight tightening of the jaw, but nothing excessive. He didn't speak, didn't challenge, didn't provoke. And yet, in that silence, he held the attention of everyone in the yard. The bully's earlier confidence had begun to falter, just enough for the onlookers to notice, just enough to create a ripple of tension that spread through the crowd. A few inmates whispered quietly to one another, leaning in to share observations that were both factual and speculative. "Look at him, he's not flinching," one said. "I've never seen anyone just stand there and not react," another replied. Their whispers traveled across the yard, picked up by others, creating a low undercurrent of conversation that heightened the sense of expectation. Every word, every observation made the scene feel heavier, more significant. Phones tilted slightly, recording, zooming in on tiny details. The slight furrow of a brow on the bully, the calm intensity in Hero's eyes, the way the sunlight highlighted the faint lines of concentration on his face. Each shot amplified the moment, making it cinematic, almost like watching a slow-motion duel without a single punch being thrown. Even distant sounds, the shuffle of boots, a cough, the clatter of a dropped item, felt magnified, punctuating the stillness in the most subtle ways. The guards' collective awareness added to the tension. One of them shifted a baton slightly, another adjusted the walkie-talkie at his belt, but neither intervened. Their restraint was a silent acknowledgement that this standoff was being resolved not by force, but by presence. Even the bully's friends seemed uneasy, sensing the subtle shift in power that wasn't expressed in words or gestures, but in the calm, unwavering authority of Hero. A pigeon suddenly fluttered from a nearby fence post, causing a ripple of movement. One of the younger inmates laughed quietly, only to stop mid-chuckle as the atmosphere reminded them that this wasn't ordinary. Everyone's gaze snapped back and the tension, already thick, seemed to tighten further. Eyes followed every step, every blink, every breath. The yard had transformed from a space of casual motion into a stage where quiet control and observation were the main players. Phones captured reactions too, hands trembling slightly as people recorded, eyes widening in anticipation, whispers rising and falling in rhythm with the standoff. Even those standing further back strained to see, leaning forward, craning their necks because everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who held the real power here? And who would make the first move? The subtle rhythm of collective attention created a feeling almost like electricity in the air. Every observer, every camera, every whisper contributed to a shared suspense. For a brief moment, the entire yard, the guards, the bully, the friends, the silent onlookers, became a single focused entity waiting, watching, leaning into the tension. It was social proof in action. The more people watched, the more everyone else felt compelled to watch too. The energy was contagious. And just as the suspense had reached its quiet peak, there was a faint shift, a twitch of a finger, a slight inhale, a micro-expression that signaled that something was about to break the tension. Everyone noticed. Phones hovered even higher, whispers intensified, and the collective anticipation became almost unbearable. Nobody had moved yet, but it was clear that the next moment would define everything. Everyone in that yard, knowingly or not, had become part of the story. The yard held its breath. Every pair of eyes, every phone camera, every whispering voice, was locked on the two men at the center of the unfolding drama. For a long moment, nothing happened. Hero remained calm, composed like a statue carved from patience itself, while the bully's confident facade began to show tiny cracks, faint hesitations, the ever-so-slight tremor of a hand, the subtle narrowing of his eyes. The bully's friends shifted uneasily, sensing a change they couldn't fully understand. They exchanged quick glances as if silently communicating. Something is off. This isn't going the way we expected. The guards, too, leaned slightly forward, hands resting lightly on their belts, eyes alert but non-intrusive, aware that this was no ordinary confrontation. Everyone was waiting, the air thick with the anticipation of what would come next. Finally, the bully made a small move, stepping closer, a defiant smirk curling his lips. "You think standing there makes you untouchable?" he sneered loud enough for everyone to hear. But Hero didn't react with anger, didn't raise a fist, didn't even tighten his jaw. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step forward, closing the distance, not aggressively but with quiet confidence. His gaze met the bully's, unwavering, steady and calm. That single moment, that calm stare, seemed to hold more weight than any shout, any punch, any threat ever could. The bully paused. His smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. He opened his mouth trying to speak, but no words came out. He had expected a fight, expected retaliation, expected chaos, but all he found was measured composure. And in that composure there was power. It was the kind of power that didn't need to shout, didn't need to prove itself. It was visible in the stillness, the confidence, the quiet authority radiating from Hero. The crowd of inmates leaned in, some whispering, some holding their breath. Phones hovered, recording, capturing the subtle micro-expressions. The tightening of the bully's jaw, the slight shift of his weight, the faint exhale that seemed to signal the first crack in his bravado. Even the guards exhaled quietly, recognizing the unusual dynamic. The yard was no longer just a place of tension. It was a theater of quiet dominance, where presence outweighed aggression and patience outlasted impulse. And then it happened, a subtle gesture from Hero. He extended a hand, not in challenge, not in threat, but in acknowledgement, a calm, composed offer that spoke volumes. The bully froze, unsure whether to accept, whether to retreat, or whether to maintain the facade of dominance. Slowly, tentatively, the hand was taken. The motion was small, almost understated, but it carried the weight of respect earned, not demanded. The shift was immediate but silent. The tension dissolved like mist in the morning sun. Phones lowered, whispers softened, and a faint murmur of admiration rippled through the crowd. The bully's shoulders slumped slightly, a quiet nod acknowledging that the encounter had been settled, not by force, not by intimidation, but by calm, measured authority. Hero didn't raise his voice, didn't taunt, didn't seek approval. He simply stood, composed, the embodiment of quiet strength. Even those who had doubted him, who had whispered in disbelief, now watched with something akin to awe. The guards relaxed, the crowd dispersed slightly, but the lesson lingered in the air. Strength is not always loud. Respect is not always demanded. And power, when exercised with calm authority, has a resonance far beyond the immediate moment. The bully retreated, not humiliated, but enlightened in his own way, understanding that the encounter had shifted something fundamental. It wasn't about proving who was stronger, it was about recognizing true composure, patience, and the quiet mastery of presence. Observers quietly absorbed the lesson, some nodding imperceptibly, some whispering among themselves, all internalizing the unexpected resolution. Hero remained still for a moment longer, letting the energy of the yard settle. Then, without a word, he turned, walking back toward the benches, each step deliberate and unhurried. The camera phones captured his retreat, the subtle nods of respect from onlookers, and the faint smiles that flickered across faces. It was a quiet victory, almost invisible in its subtlety, yet profoundly impactful. The yard slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the shuffle of feet, the distant voices, the occasional clang of a door, but the story of that encounter lingered. It was a shared memory, witnessed collectively, recorded, and remembered. Everyone who had watched knew they had seen something rare. A confrontation resolved without chaos, a tension diffused with calm, a display of power that didn't need to shout to be felt. In that ordinary corner of a UK prison yard, under the sun and shadows, the extraordinary had quietly unfolded. And for everyone watching, the lesson was clear. Composure and presence often speak louder than aggression. Patience and calm can command respect in ways that intimidation never could. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room holds the most undeniable power of all. The yard had returned to its usual rhythm, yet the echoes of what had just unfolded lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. Phones had been lowered, whispers had softened, and the bully had retreated, but the lesson in that quiet confrontation remained as vivid as the sun-dappled shadows on the concrete. It was a moment that transcended the ordinary chaos of the prison yard, a subtle reminder that strength doesn't always announce itself with volume, aggression, or visible dominance. For Hero, it had never been about proving superiority or forcing respect. His calm authority had been silent but unmistakable. That stillness, that measured patience, had carried more weight than any shouting match or display of brute force could ever have achieved. The bully, once confident, had discovered something that many people never learn. that intimidation loses its power in the presence of composure. And for those who had watched, the lesson was tangible, almost tactile, even in the absence of dramatic action. In life, whether inside a prison, at school, in the workplace, or even within family dynamics, moments like these occur more often than people realize. Situations arise where others try to dominate, to provoke, to push boundaries, and it's easy to react impulsively, shouting, arguing, or retaliating in anger. But the story of Hero shows that there is another way. Calm, patient, measured responses often hold far more influence than aggressive reactions. Authority that is earned quietly, rather than demanded loudly, resonates more deeply and lasts longer. Think about everyday interactions. Perhaps a colleague dismisses your idea in a meeting, or someone cuts in line, or a friend speaks harshly without thinking. In that instant, it might feel urgent to respond, to assert yourself, to show your strength. But taking a step back, observing the situation, maintaining composure, and acting with deliberate intention can transform the outcome. You might not only resolve the tension, but you can also gain respect in a way that anger and aggression never achieve. Hero's encounter demonstrates another subtle truth. Observation is a form of power. He didn't need to move immediately, didn't need to respond with confrontation. By simply being present, by quietly assessing the bully, he allowed the tension to reveal itself, for patterns to emerge, and for the aggressor's own uncertainty to come to the surface. In many real-life situations, the ability to pause, watch, and understand before reacting can prevent unnecessary conflict and create opportunities for resolution that are elegant and effective. It's also about perspective. The bully thought he controlled the situation, yet he had misjudged the quiet strength of Hero. Often, people misjudge situations because they assume that volume equals authority, or that aggression will always intimidate. Life teaches us over and over that the loudest voice does not always command the room. Quiet confidence, patient decision-making, and measured action often carry far more influence, and they leave a lasting impression. Even the observers, the crowd in the yard, experienced a subtle transformation. They had witnessed a realignment of power, not through force but through calm mastery. For anyone watching, there was an internal shift, a recognition that patience, restraint, and composed authority could be more effective than any impulsive action. The lesson wasn't abstract. It was practical, applicable to school corridors, office spaces, home disputes, or social interactions. And this is where the story resonates most strongly. The quiet moments, the controlled pauses, the deliberate choices we make when tension arises, these are the moments that define character. They are often invisible to the casual observer but profoundly impactful to those who are paying attention. Strength isn't measured by reaction speed or loudness. It is measured by composure, consistency, and clarity in the face of provocation. As the yard returned to normal, as footsteps shuffled and conversations resumed, the lesson lingered quietly in the minds of everyone present. Strength is not loud. Respect is not demanded. Authority is not claimed with force. It is earned through patience, calm, observation, and deliberate action. And sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one who changes everything. Not with chaos, not with drama, but with presence and measured confidence. So, the next time you face tension, conflict, or provocation, pause. Observe. Consider. Respond with calm intention rather than immediate reaction. Whether at work, school, or home, your composure can turn a potentially volatile situation into one of understanding and respect. And in doing so, you may discover a quiet, powerful influence that outlasts aggression and leaves a lasting impression, just as Hero demonstrated in the prison yard that day. The yard had quieted completely now. The tension that had gripped every observer, every guard, every inmate had dissolved, leaving behind a calm, almost reflective atmosphere. Phones that had hovered midair now rested in laps and pockets. Conversations had resumed, but with a different tone, subtle whispers of awe, quiet nods of respect, and the occasional tentative smile. Everyone present carried with them a memory, a lesson, an understanding of something deeper than the usual dynamics of the prison yard. Hero had walked back toward his bench with measured steps, each one deliberate, each one a silent statement of calm authority. He had not needed to raise his voice, to throw a punch, to demand respect through visible power. And yet, through quiet composure alone, he had reshaped the atmosphere, shifted the energy of the yard, and subtly redefined what it meant to be strong. The bully, once confident and aggressive, had retreated, not in humiliation but in recognition. Respect had been earned, not forced, and that distinction lingered in the minds of all who witnessed it. For those observing, the moment held a mirror to their own lives. How often had they reacted impulsively to provocation? How often had they allowed loud voices, aggression, or the pressure of a situation to dictate their responses? And how much more effective, how much more impactful could they be if they took a moment, just a moment, to pause, to breathe, to observe, to respond thoughtfully rather than react reflexively? These questions echoed quietly in the minds of the crowd, some recognizing them consciously, some absorbing them subconsciously. The ripple effect of composure was visible everywhere. Guards who had initially shifted nervously now straightened, appreciating the subtle mastery that had resolved a potentially volatile situation. Inmates whispered among themselves not with fear but with curiosity and reflection, realizing that the power dynamics they often relied upon, aggression, intimidation, loudness, were not the only ways to assert influence. They had witnessed a form of strength that was patient, strategic, and profoundly effective. Even the bully, once the center of attention, had become a participant in learning without words. His retreat was not defeat, it was understanding. By accepting the quiet authority of Hero, he had internalized a lesson that would likely linger far longer than any shouted confrontation could have. That recognition, subtle as it was, highlighted a universal truth. The most enduring influence comes from calm presence, careful observation, and thoughtful action. And for the audience, both those in the yard and those watching this story unfold online, the takeaway was unmistakable. Strength is not measured by volume. Respect is not earned through aggression. Authority is not claimed through chaos or intimidation. Instead, composure, patience, observation, and deliberate choices carry a weight far greater than immediate, reactive force. The quiet, thoughtful approach often achieves what brute strength and impulsive action cannot. So, consider the last moments of the yard. The slight nods, the faint exhalations, the subtle adjustments of posture, the hushed whispers among observers, all of these signals pointed to the same truth. Influence is most powerful when it is earned silently. The calm person who measures their words and actions is often the one who changes outcomes, shifts perceptions, and leaves lasting impressions. That is the real power witnessed in this ordinary yet extraordinary corner of the prison yard. Now pause and reflect on your own life. How do you respond to tension, conflict, or challenge? Do you react immediately, letting frustration or impulse guide your choices? Or do you, like Hero, pause, observe, and respond with intention? There is a quiet strength in restraint, in measured action, and in the decision to assert authority without aggression. When you apply this principle in everyday situations, whether at school, work, home, or social spaces, you may discover that respect, influence, and trust flow more naturally than through confrontation or loud assertion. If you believe in the power of calm strength, if you recognize that composure often outweighs aggression, type respect in the comments. Share a moment when patience and calm resolved a difficult situation for you, or reflect on a time when someone else's quiet authority left an impact on your life. By doing so, you participate in a shared understanding, reinforcing the lesson for yourself and for others. And finally, remember this: life will always present situations where impulse and reaction tempt you. Yet, the quiet, composed, patient approach often holds the key to lasting influence. Pause. Observe. Respond thoughtfully. Your strength may not be the loudest in the room, but it may be the most powerful. Like, subscribe, and share this story if you want to inspire calm, deliberate strength in your own circles. Every time you apply these lessons, you contribute to a ripple of respect and composed authority, quietly transforming the world around you.